Welcome to this session. My name is Chris Irwin. I'm the Digital Skills Evangelist. I'm based in the library. And today we are going to look at the ethical and responsible use of generative AI. So the way the session is going to work is I'm going to take you through some of the key ethical considerations that you might want to consider in your use of AI, introduce a bit of a framework you might want to adopt, but I want to encourage you to consider your own framework and how you can go about using AI tools in the future in a way that is appropriate and as ethical and responsible as possible. So I'm interested to know what's brought you to this session. So you can pop a little message in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with. So I'll allow a couple of minutes for you to consider that. You can just pop it in the chat and let me know. And as there's only a few of us today, I'll try my best to kind of steer towards what you'd like to get out of this session. Hello.
Maybe I can just start. Hi, Chris, Rabia here. So I'm doing my master's in human rights, culture, and social justice, and there I am specializing in artificial intelligence. I mean, not generative AI, but more like fairness, ethical, and bias in AI. So researching this type of topics, so that I'm highly interested, especially in the wording like ethical, responsible, fair, bias, and I kind of have the feeling that every discipline is trying to find out their own wording for it because they are confronting with other type of biases they do while researching. So I'm just interested in trying to find as much information about ethical type of or ethical regulation of artificial intelligence as possible.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
You sound like an expert, so maybe you should be
No,
leading this session instead of me.
no. I mean, I'm doing right now a quantitative research method, especially like just as an example with sexism in the workplace and how many women are nowadays specialized in artificial intelligence, how this would help, like, I don't know, to have a talk in bias and AI in the workplace, just like in the front and not in the back. So I'm making a research about that right now.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then uh, Talini says, I just want to grow my knowledge on AI, considering that I only use chat film recommendations. Well, I mean, it's up to you if you think that's an appropriate use. So what we're going to do is we'll go through the learning objectives, and then we will have a bit of a chat around each of the key, I suppose, ethical principles, ethical considerations with AI, and then go on to a bit of a framework. And then I've got a bunch of news articles actually. Some are older than others, some are very, very recent, about AI use out there in the world, and I'll allow some time for you to kind of have a look at those, consider the pros and cons if you think the use of AI in those instances was appropriate, potential impacts on society. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a huge, huge area, and it's a bit of a minefield. Like, the tools, the technology is developing at such a rapid rate that it is very overwhelming and it's difficult to keep up. And even in such a short space of time, like since ChatGPT was released, a couple of years ago, we've seen a huge, huge increase in not only the interest of AI, but also in what AI can do. So bear that in mind, that what AI can do today and what it's being used for today, or rather what it can't be used for today, it could very well be used for in the future. So let's go into the learning objectives. So by the end of the session today, you'll hopefully be able to understand the key ethical considerations associated with artificial intelligence. We'll be analysing the potential impacts of AI on society, and hopefully you'll be able to start to develop a personal framework for using AI responsibly in various contexts. So, um, everybody's use of AI is different. You can use it for lots and lots of different use cases, and it's impossible for me as a workshop leader, as a workshop facilitator, to tailor what I'm doing to every possible use case. So what I'd like you to be thinking about is how you can begin to think about AI in a particular way, and really question and really critically evaluate whether your personal use of AI is appropriate in different use cases. I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm going to be a bit sniffy and a bit coughy. Please bear with me. I'll try to mute if I need to sneeze. Um, so these are some of the key ethical considerations that we're going to look at today. We've got accountability, privacy concerns and data, biases, misuse and abuse of AI, questions around transparency, fairness and access, and also environmental considerations. So we'll take a bit of time to go through some of these in more detail, and please feel free to pop stuff in the chat, or unmute yourself and just share your thoughts on some of these considerations. So first up, we've got accountability. So we need to consider when we're using AI tools, particularly generative AI, but not only generative AI. Oh, my chair's just collapsed underneath me. Who has responsibility for the decisions made and the output that these tools generate? I think one of the articles that I'll share with you a little bit later was how the UK government was using an AI tool to evaluate universal credit claims, and how the AI tool was actually being unfairly biased against people who were putting these claims in. So in that instance, who is being held responsible for that negative outcome, that it was biased against people whose claims it was assessing? Is it the government? Is it the manufacturer of the AI tool? Is it the end user? So the people who are using that tool on a daily basis. I've put government/regulators. We need to acknowledge that regulators are, or any kind of regulation is always very slow to catch up across all technology, not just AI. But with AI, because of its rapid development and how quickly it's come about and become ingrained in so many aspects of our lives, it's really, really lagging behind. And we'll go on to a bit of regulation a little bit later on as well. So you need to really consider, who is being held accountable for the decisions that AI is making. And, if it is looking at data and predicting outcomes, what will those outcomes, how will those outcomes affect society, people at large? Who will they affect? And you should also consider, the reliability of information when it comes to training AI models. Some training methods use real data that is brought in from sources across the internet. That they're trained on human knowledge, but in some cases, AI models are trained in ways where they use synthetic data, which has been generated by the AI. So how can we be sure that that information is actually correct, factually correct, and how can we be sure that information is reliable? And this is often the case if AI is being trained to in kind of restricted data or information that's classified, then models may be trained on synthetic or fake data. How does that affect the output? So there's big questions of accountability, but it ultimately boils down to is, can AI models as a technological entity be held responsible? No, not really. You can't take an AI to court, because it's not a thing like that. So in that case, well, who is held responsible? Is it a regulator? Is it the company that's developing the model? Is it the end user who's generating the content? Or is it a combination of all of those? So there are big questions around accountability when it comes to AI. And this should inform your decision making when deciding whether or not to use AI. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts around ideas of accountability when it comes to AI? No? So next up is privacy and data protection. So AI models are trained on huge amounts of data. You need to put a huge amount of data into an AI model to train it to generate some kind of output, whether that's something like in a generative AI model where it's creating something unique based on a user prompt, using that data to inform its response to that prompt, or whether or not it's an AI model that's being used to predict something based on patterns in data. So you need to be mindful about what you're putting into an AI model. If and I'm thinking around an academic or higher education use case, if you've got access to a journal article that isn't in the public domain, and then you pop that into a model to analyze it, are you then breaking copyright laws? Because, you know, just scaling the internet, that article might be behind a paywall. You might need to pay the copyright holder to get access to that article or that piece of creative work. And then here you are just popping it into the model. That data that you're putting into the model could then be used to train that model. And you should also be considering, if you're using AI to analyze data, if you're doing a research project and you've collected, if you've interviewed people or you've done a survey and collected data in that regard, you can't then go ahead and just pop all of that data into an AI model for an analysis, because again, that data could then be used to train the AI model behind the scenes. There's also questions around the UK GDPR, which is the main legislation that looks after data protection in the UK. Under the UK GDPR, personal data should not leave the UK or GDPR area, which is the European Union. And if you're putting personal data into a cloud-based AI system, then that could then be transferred to a data center in the US or in Asia or outside of that region. And that would be classed as a data breach under the GDPR. And really, when it comes to AI, data protection legislation is one of the closest things we have to a method of regulation for AI systems. And then additionally, one of the individual rights under the GDPR is the right to deletion. There are other individual rights that are codified within this legislation. And one of those rights is the right to deletion. And that is the right of an individual to request that data held on you is deleted. And you can ask for proof that that data is deleted. And if you're putting personal data into an AI model, how can you then prove that that data has been deleted later on? Because then it's just swallowed up by this machine. It goes out, it trains a model. You then are unable, essentially, to provide a concrete guarantee that that data has been deleted. So there are huge questions around privacy and data protection when it comes to AI that you should also be considering. And again, when it comes to explicit regulation for AI models, there is a lag. We're playing catch up. But data protection and privacy laws are kind of often used to govern the use of AI, particularly when it comes to personal data. So you should be aware of that. Always be mindful about what data you're putting into an AI, because it can be used to train that model later on, and that is bad. Next up is bias, which is a huge thing. A huge concern when it comes to AI. So we need to remember that AI is a human invention. It's trained on human data in most cases, or data that is collected and labeled and curated by human beings in whatever process you're using to train your AI model. And because of that, you have AI mirroring um, biases and stereotypes when it's trained, and those surface when AI generates some kind of output. And what research has indicated is that this can create a bit of a feedback loop. There was a recent study done by a professor at UCL and at MIT that has indicated that people are inherently biased. So when AI systems are trained on sets of data that have been produced by people, AI algorithms learn these human biases and then exploit and amplify these biases to improve its prediction accuracy. They found that people who are interacting with biased AI systems can then become more biased because they believe that information that comes out of that AI model without critically evaluating it. And this creates a snowball effect where the biases in original data sets become amplified, which increases the biases of the person using the AI. And that links to this idea that that uncritical that using these AI tools is actually eroding. The professor who made the research, I do. I've got a reference slide at the end, which I can, of course, share with you. But the name of the professor is Tali Sharot, Talisharot, and this was on UCL's news page. So I know you're interested in biases, so definitely have a look at this. And allied to this is a recent study that was just released a couple of weeks ago by Microsoft, which has indicated that intensive use of AI, particularly generative AI models, is actually eroding people's critical thinking skills. And again, you can just Google Microsoft generative AI critical thinking skills erosion report, I suppose, which is a huge problem. People are relying on this in the same way that you would rely on Google search, but at least with Google, you have to kind of establish whether or not the source you're using, is reliable, is reputable. Is it backed by research? Is it peer reviewed, etc., etc. Unless you're asking a generative AI model to explicitly provide you with that, then it won't. So you get this information, which could very well be wrong, which reinforces these biases, and so on and so forth. So huge issue here with biases. And how can you mitigate it? Well, you need to think critically. That is the only way. If you're using something like ChatGPT, a generative AI model, you might want to question the biases. You might want to say, okay, well, this seems biased, provide a counterpoint, or have you considered X, Y, and Z, to kind of create that dialogical kind of question and answer response, which can be a good method to use when using these models. Always question with what the information comes up. Always ask for sources, always ask for more information. And it's getting better, particularly ChatGPT has gotten a lot better at providing sources. So bear that in mind. Next, you should consider transparency. So how transparent are these huge technology conglomerates who are producing these models. Some AI companies are more transparent than others when it comes to um, these this idea of training data. Are these tech companies disclosing where their data comes from? Got a typo there, apologies. Um, have the people who have created the training data set consented to it? So there was one example is Adobe, who create software like Photoshop, Illustrator, and Premiere Pro. They have an AI model, and there was huge outcry not that long ago, only in the past year, 2 years, I would say, where they changed their privacy policy and the policy around the use of their tools. And some creatives who use their tools very regularly, they're the market leader in these tools, had interpreted their update in terms of conditions as that they have free reign to use any software that's any content created in their software to train their generative AI models. Adobe were then able to respond and say that's not the case, that is an incorrect interpretation. They clarified their response, but it still damaged Adobe's reputation nonetheless. And I have to say, since then, Adobe have been much clearer in where they're training their models. So if you look on Adobe Stock, which is their stock library of huge amounts of content, if you're a content creator and you're uploading your content to the Adobe Stock library, you can remove yourself. You can tick a box whether or not you consent to your content being used to train their generative AI models, and that contrasts with OpenAI as an example. This is an excellent clip that I'll just show you, where OpenAI's chief technical officer, former chief technical officer, Mira Murati, was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about how OpenAI trained their video generation model called Sora.
What data was used to train Sora?
I'll just drag that over because, of course, it's opened it in a different tab.
We used publicly available data and licensed data.
So videos on YouTube?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Okay. Videos from Facebook, Instagram?
If they were publicly available, publicly available to use, there might be the data, but I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not confident about it.
What about Shutterstock? I know you guys have a deal with them.
I'm just not going to go into the details of the data that was used, but it was publicly available or licensed data.
So quite problematic that the CTO, who's in charge of the development of these tools, actually can't confirm or deny where that training data has come from. So really, really problematic. However, there are ways to verify where this data has come from. So there is an organization called the Content Authenticity Initiative. I'll just go to this link here, and you can see that's their mission statement: restoring trust and transparency in the age of AI. And the Content Authenticity Initiative has been set up and signed up to by a huge range of tech companies and media organizations like Microsoft, the BBC, Adobe. And what they've committed to doing is that any content that is created using their platforms has a marker built into the metadata, which will signify that content has been created using an AI tool. And that metadata marker is called a content credential. So I'll pop this link in the chat. You can have have a look at this in your own time. But they actually have a tool that you can upload an image to, and it will tell you whether or not it has been used. If it will tell you whether or not AI has been used to create that image at some point in the process. And it's actually quite good in that it will tell you if something's been generated completely by AI, or it will tell you if something has had one kind of part of it created using AI. And you've got these AI models like Adobe Firefly, for example, where you can create a whole composition. But then you've also got tools integrated into things like Photoshop. So in Photoshop's case, you might take a photo yourself, but then you might use AI to edit particular parts of that image. And then if you upload it to the content credentials site, it will say, okay, well, AI was used to edit one small part of this versus this whole image was created with AI. But it's important to note that only organizations that have signed up to the initiative will get good results. If you upload something that's been created by an OpenAI product because they're not part of this initiative, it will say, we don't know. That there is no way to know whether or not AI was used because that marker is not in the metadata because this company is not part of this initiative. So you can just click on inspect and drop a huge amount of different files there into this tool, and it will generate a report. But also because Microsoft is part of this initiative, if you drop an AI-generated image into Microsoft Word, for example, it will actually highlight it and pop this little logo up here onto that image. It's kind of like a watermark. So you've got these really nice integrations that are appearing in the products of companies that have signed up to this. So that there is an effort to become more transparent from some big players in the game, but not from others, which is problematic. So that should help you decide whether or not an AI tool is appropriate to use. Okay, well, if a company is not being transparent, then do I really want to use their tool? You should bear that in mind. Next up is something that a lot of people just simply don't think about when it comes to AI use. Using AI and other cloud-based services like cloud storage, for example, is a hugely energy-intensive process. And people just don't seem to realize it. So you should consider when you're using an AI tool, is this a good use of this resource? As an example, using ChatGPT to write a 100-word email uses enough energy to fully charge 7 iPhone Pro Maxes, which is the same as 140 kilowatt hours. But then you have to think, well, okay, well, maybe I can use a bit of brain power to write the 100-word email myself, because 7 charges of an iPhone is not really a good use of that energy. In terms of cooling the data center that is required to power the AI process, it uses 500 milliliters of water. That's half a liter of water to generate a 100-word email, which is a lot. It's a big bottle. The training of ChatGPT 3, so the previous version, used 5.4 million liters of water, which is the annual usage of 26 UK households. And to put that into perspective, ChatGPT 3 is 10 times smaller than GPT-4, which is the newest version in terms of parameters. So you can imagine if it's used that much water to train the previous version, it's used 10 times as much to generate the newest, the most recent version. And by 2027, global AI is expected to use the equivalent of half of the UK's annual water usage, which is about 5 billion cubic meters. Most statistics are from an article from the Times, again, which are in the references, which I can happily send over to you. And again, and this applies to all technological equipment, not just AI. How do we get our hands on, how do the manufacturers of the equipment required to power AI, and the equipment that we use to interface with AI, like phones, laptops, tablets, there is a huge amount of exploitation in the production chain of procuring the rare earth minerals, the raw materials that are used in the production of the hardware. So, the processors that go into data centers, the processors that go into your phone, into your computer. So, really think hard if whether or not your use of AI is a good use of resources. You should also think about fairness and access. Is my AI use appropriate when there are people who simply can't afford to access or don't have the means of access to these AI tools? I'm thinking, if you're using a paid tool to do some research for you or to analyze the output of your research, is that fair when other people in a similar position to you in that research field or on your course can't access those tools because they are paid for? And that goes for a lot of digital equipment and internet access, and that's referred to as the digital divide. Also consider accessibility from a disability point of view. Are the tools that you're using AI disability accessible? There is a lot of research at the moment around using AI tools to improve accessibility from that perspective, which is good to see. But nonetheless, you should still consider this when you're deciding whether or not to use AI for a particular task. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has recently said that the use of AI must benefit everyone, including the 1/3 of humanity who are still offline. Human rights, transparency, and accountability must light the way when it comes to AI usage. And finally, AI is, there is a huge amount of misuse and abuse when it comes to AI. Google have done a big report on this, which is really interesting to read. Again, it's in the references. So you've got this creation of harmful material, such as deep fakes, politicians, celebrities saying things that they haven't said, and also other methods of disinformation. So using ChatGPT or generative AI models to create fake pictures, to create fake news articles, to create websites that look real but are not, creating websites that look authentic but are not. There are huge implications for cybersecurity, using AI to assist with hacking, using AI to AI-assisted password attacking. There are lots of methods to try and crack a password, and AI can expedite that, using AI for scams and fraud. So again, creating authentic looking websites, generating authentic looking emails from your bank, etc., etc. And of course, using AI for plagiarism, which is a big concern in higher education. You might not think it's plagiarism, copying and pasting an AI output, but it is plagiarism. You need to make sure that you properly cite any output from an AI model that you use in your academic work, just like you would any other source, be it a book, a journal article, a video, a news article, etc., etc. So that's kind of looked at a lot of different considerations. And this is one particular framework that has been developed by some librarians in the US to, I guess, interrogate your AI use. So it's called ROBOT. It's a very helpful acronym to remember. And ROBOT stands for reliability, objective, bias, owner, and type. And you can see it draws on some of those threads that I've talked about in the workshop so far. So you've got this idea of reliability. How reliable is the tool? How can you be sure of its reliability? The objective of your AI use. What do you want to achieve when you're using an AI tool? Always keep that in the front of your mind. Biases, which we've talked about. Owner, so who has developed the tool? What is their incentive? Have they been transparent? And also, what type of tool are you using? Which AI model does it use? Where has it got its data from? Are you using the right kind of AI model for the job? Some AI models are better at certain things than others. There are specific tools out there designed for researchers. There are specific tools out there for image generation. Are you using the right AI tool for the job? Okay. So I've spoken for a lot. I apologize. I don't like talking for long periods of time. But I've got a task for you now. I will pop some articles in the chat for you to have a look at. And normally, if we have a bigger group, I'll ask for you to summarize, to feedback on what you found in these articles. But since it's only a few of us today, maybe we can just talk more broadly about AI rather than looking at these articles specifically. So what I'd like you to do, nonetheless, I think it's a good exercise for you to kind of apply what we've looked at today, is to summarize and analyze some of the ethical considerations in the news articles relating to AI and its use. You might want to use robot framework, and I'll pop that slide back up. You might want to develop your own framework, consider some of the ethical concerns that we've covered, and also to consider the impacts on society at large. So I've got a few. I'll just copy and paste them over. So here's a bunch of articles. Have a look. They're covering a huge range of topics. Just see what, find one that is perhaps relevant to your area of study or not. Have a little read through. I've got loads of these. I'm always adding to this list because, these use cases are always in the news, and there's always like a positive and a negative, so it's quite a good task to do. I mean, I should have actually said, if I just go back a couple of slides regarding misuse and abuse. Countries are being very slow with legislation to kind of combat this in a lot of ways. But when it comes to the creation of harmful material, the UK actually announced just last week or the week before that it's going to be the first country in the world to introduce legislation around the use of generative AI models to create harmful content of children. And it's quite shocking, I think, that we're going to be the first country in the world to introduce this. Why are other places not doing it when these tools have been around for now 2 years? Just to give you an example of how long it's taken for the regulation to catch up. You would think that is a kind of really, really important thing to legislate against, and yet here we are over 2 years later, and this legislation is only being introduced. So here's the robot framework. I'll give you maybe 10 minutes or so to have a look through some of those articles, and then we'll come back for the final few minutes and we can share thoughts. Feel free to ask any questions, pop questions in the chat, any comments you have, and I'll mute my microphone and turn my camera off as well. So yes, we'll come back in about, I'll say 9 minutes now. Okie doke. Right, okay, so how did you get on? If anybody has anything to share or maybe any questions, please do ask away. What I'll do is I'll just stop sharing and then I'll export the slides um, as as a PDF, and then you can have access to them, to all of the references. Does anybody have any feedback? Hello.
I can just share my thoughts about it. Sorry, it's a
Hmm.
little bit noisy here.
That's all right.
So many children. But yeah, I just looked at the case with the lawyer who cited the fake case, which was generated by ChatGPT. And the talk was about, okay, whom to make accountable. And there was like, okay, this is the lawyer who should be accountable or whatever. And I'm thinking about no one is making the AI itself accountable, therefore, since it is not a filter which is made by humans. It's not a human who is just like getting information from this different type of sources and creating knowledge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
There is human in between who is filtering the information, and now it's just a system, automated system, and no one is accounting artificial intelligence. Therefore, since the wording intelligence is also like a little bit confusing because does not mean that it is intelligent,
Mm.
and people are counting it for being intelligent. So therefore, I am really on the side like making business owners therefore responsible because they are nowadays generating so much wealth with it.
Mm.
So I
I
think,
mean, I think that there's this kind of distinction at the moment that AI, it looks impressive,
yeah,
but there is still, I think, a long way to go before we get to this idea of an artificial general intelligence, which is
mm,
more aligned with a human notion of intelligence, more similar to how we experience intelligence. And that will bring with it a whole host of other ethical issues. Um, but yeah, the lawyer is an interesting one. In fact, I think I saw not a follow-up, but a similar case in the UK recently, where a law firm had actually banned their employees from using any kind of AI tool because the majority of them were using it. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, you have this issue where this lawyer was just citing this completely made up case, this hallucination that the AI had come up with. They didn't engage their critical thinking skills and actually evaluate and think, oh, okay, well, maybe I should double check this. They just used it like a search engine and, put
yeah.
full trust in it, which, is a huge issue. Let me just see if this is downloaded. It
And I'm
has.
also thinking about like in the past when we had like this industrial revolution and we wanted to be more efficient, cost efficient, and also like duplicating things, and then we build up norms or whatever to be faster and faster. And now we are doing it like with knowledge, and we want to use like products,
Mm.
knowledge as a product, not of thinking. There is no human, so I'm a little bit concerned about it when we have like knowledge produced in everyone's brain at the same time, same thing.
I'm I mean, I think it is the commodification, is that the right word? The commodification of knowledge. And I think you've picked up on a really important point there that we haven't really addressed is issues with efficiency. Is that a lot of people in higher up positions, they are seeing AI as a way to shortcut, as a way to replace human beings and their contributions. Which is leading to job displacement in some cases, particularly around creative work. And one of those articles that I shared was about I think it's the Sydney Queensland Symphony Orchestra, who used AI to generate some social media content, and it backfired massively because people were complaining that you've put creators out of a job, a photographer, graphic designer, social media creator out of a job and using AI, and you've used it poorly. You've created something that looks awful, and you still thought, oh, okay, well, it's okay to use it. So, there are huge questions around the originality, the creativity aspect of generative AI tools as well, not just the job displacement side of things. And, as we
And I
progress
also
further
think,
through late stage capitalism, this idea of efficiency and replacement of human beings, I think, is very problematic.
yeah, and as I said, we are always talking about the product. And when it comes to creativity, I think people who are creative doesn't think about the product itself. So they're about the process and being creative, thinking about it. And
Mm.
now replacing like the creatives in, as I said, like, I don't know, maybe an architecture or whatever, just like with AI. And I think it's so sad for the human being itself.
Mm. I mean, I think if I think back to when I did my degree, I remember learning about this shift in the 20th century when it comes to creating art. There's this shift away from seeing the product as this thing on a pedestal. The process is also as equally important in the creation of an artwork. And you're absolutely right that when using AI, you completely lose that aspect of creativity, the kind of process that's involved, which is equally important. So thank you for that. That's been a really
Thank
helpful
you.
conversation. I'm just aware that it's now 1 o'clock, so we will bring this to a close. But thank you very much for coming. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop into the chat a workshop evaluation survey link. I'd be really grateful if you could fill that in. It is anonymous, and it just is a way for me to gather feedback to improve these sessions in future. So I'd be very grateful if you could fill that in. And like I say, thank you for coming. You can email me if you have any questions, or just drop me a message on Teams. And this recording will find its way onto YouTube eventually, but I'll blur out names and faces, so you're not identifiable. Okie doke.
Thank you.
Fab. Well, I hope to see you at workshops in the future. Okie doke. Bye.